Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Andrew, and we are the IB English guys. Folks, in our last video, we looked at a great speech from the film Remember the Titans, where we looked at the words of Coach Boone, a character in the film, and he was trying to motivate and unify different people on his team who shared very different ideologies. Today, we're going to look at a second speech, Mr. Giles. What's our plan for today?
Today we're looking at a speech by Barack Obama in 2008. He was, again, a candidate hopeful to run for U.S. president, and this speech propelled him to really the national stage, and we think it's a powerful speech.
Yeah.
Similar to Coach Boone, he's addressing social division and civil unrest.
Yeah. To me, Mr. Giles, it seems like a great opportunity to continue building our annotation and deconstruction skills while we start playing with some comparative ideas. Why are comparative ideas so important for our class?
Oh, well, we're thinking constantly about the paper 2 where we're asked to compare and contrast and look for similarities and differences between texts. These two speeches kind of invite us to do that. We're not going to write a paper 2 necessarily about two speeches.
We're going to practice these skills because that's what scholars do. That's what thinkers do. Giles, what do you say we just quickly tap back into the broad features of speeches?
Sure. We want to think about ethos. Ethos is the credibility of the speaker. What does the speaker do to establish their credibility and their relationship with the audience?
We want to think about the appeal to pathos as well. How do speakers evoke emotional responses in their audience?
We want to think about logos. What kinds of logic and reasoning and facts and support does the speaker use to bolster their argument? Keep in mind, these three things are not necessarily distinct techniques. They're broad appeals, and this is how I look at those three things.
Yeah, we want to think about modality in our speech as well. We want to think about words and the degree of certainty that are associated with these words. Look for words such as must, might, should. Those are some words that obviously have varying degrees of modality.
Speeches have structure as a whole, so we want to look at the speech, again, structurally and think about what is a unifying motif maybe that unifies the speech. How does the speech begin? How does it transition to different ideas?
We want to think about structural moves at the sentence level. Perhaps there's something with very short syntax. Maybe you see parallel structure. Maybe you see tricolon, hypophora, anaphora, chiasmus. You know the tools. Look for those sentence levels tools.
Yeah, we also want to think about language moves. We want to think about how does the speaker use language. For example, they might use a symbol. They might develop an extended metaphor. They might, again, use rich imagery or make allusions to history. So this is all the things that writers do or speakers do with language.
All right, now last time, as I mentioned, we looked at Coach Boone and we thought about the impact of his words at Gettysburg. This time we're going to look at the words of Barack Obama, and we're going to see how he is able to use language to inspire, motivate, and unify a country. Giles, give us a little context for this one.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because we want to remember a speech has a time and a place, and if we're not thinking about that, then we're not really understanding the speech. This was given in 2008. Just for reference, he was elected in 2008 later that year, but this was, again, he spoke at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, and he was thinking about the civil unrest and the division in the country, and he was addressing that directly, and this really got a lot of national attention. And he is a powerful speaker who uses tons of rhetoric.
Yeah, you want to take a crack at it, Giles? I tried to be Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
I did okay. You want to go try to be Mr. Obama?
I'll try my best, but I can't do Obama justice, but I'll give it a shot. Here's what part of what President Obama said. That is one option. Or, at this moment, in this election, we can come together and say, not this time. This time, we want to talk about the crumbling schools that are stealing the future of black children and white children and Asian children and Hispanic children and Native American children. This time, we want to reject the cynicism that tells us that these kids can't learn, that those kids who don't look like us are somebody else's problems. The children of America are not those kids. They are our kids, and we will not let them fall behind in a 21st century economy. Not this time. This time, we want to talk about how the lines in the emergency room are filled with whites and blacks and Hispanics who do not have health care, who do not have the power on their own to overcome the special interests in Washington, but who can take them on if we do it together. This time, we want to talk about the shuttered mills that once provided a decent life for men and women of every race, and the homes for sale that once belonged to Americans from every religion, every region, every walk of life. This time, we want to talk about the fact that the real problem is not someone who doesn't look like you might take your job. It's that the corporation you work for will ship it overseas for nothing more than a profit. This time, we want to talk about the men and women of every color and creed who serve together and fight together and bleed together under the same proud flag. We want to talk about how to bring them home from a war that should never have been authorized and should never have been waged. And we want to talk about how we'll show our patriotism by caring for them and their families, by giving them the benefits that they have earned. I would not be running for president if I didn't believe with all my heart that this is what the vast majority of Americans want for this country. This union may never be perfect, but generation after generation has shown that it can always be perfected. And today, whenever I find myself feeling doubtful or cynical about this possibility, what gives me the most hope is the next generation, the young people, whose attitudes and beliefs and openness to change have already made history in this election.
Wow, Barack Giles, nicely done, man. That guy is a powerful speaker, incredible rhetoric, and I can actually hear his voice, lingering in my mind as you read that
incredible.
speech.
Again,
Yeah.
we'll link the video, the YouTube video of his actual speech, so you can watch that and listen to it. It's so powerful.
Now, Mr. Giles, I think, to help out our viewers today, we want to talk about that annotation process that we like to use where we have sort of rich ideas running down the left-hand margin, and we want to look at, try to pin those ideas to specific authorial choices and terminology in the right-hand column. Why don't we start with the first paragraph and talk about some of the big ideas you see hanging out in this first paragraph?
Yeah, let's do that. And then we'll also, at the same time, after that, we'll look at the features. So again, remember that this is an excerpt. So this is a part of a bigger speech. So again, when he talks about that as one option, he's actually addressing the other option that was that was given. Now he's going to give a new option. Okay, and this is again an alternative option that he wants us to follow. Okay, and he's really talking about in this first paragraph the crisis of public education and the children, how children are the potential.
Yeah, and when I think about sort of this crisis of public education, which phrase really accentuates that? Well, I can see the visual imagery of crumbling schools, Mr. Giles, and to me that really does show a crisis. I see the word stealing and thinking about how these crumbling schools is actually stealing the future of the children. I notice this idea of polysyndeton, where we have black children and white children and Asian children and Hispanic children, and this idea that this is just the accumulation of this effect is impacting so many kids.
Yeah.
Such incredible language here.
I mean, it's such a multicultural, multiracial country, and I think he's really addressing all of those, and I think that's super powerful. Not this time. Notice the repetition of that. That's a fragment. But again, this is a very definitive, that's a strong authoritative mood and tone. Not this time. And it's like almost like a dividing line. I love that line.
Yeah, lastly, we do see that inclusive language at the top. We know that if Barack Obama wants to be president, he needs to put himself in the same group as his listeners. It's not I versus you. It's we together, what we together can accomplish. Very skillful.
Typical political speech now. We're going to go on to the next topic. So we've talked about education. Now we're going to talk about healthcare. So similarly, this particular paragraph is looking at healthcare and politics. I notice the imagery of the lines in the emergency room. I can picture that. I can see that. And again, that's establishing the problem of the healthcare system.
Yeah, again, we see him playing with negation. They do not have healthcare, do not have power, right? So I think, again, it's what we're lacking and what we together collectively, if we do it together, that inclusive language, that idea of unity is really coming back together again in the last sentence of this paragraph.
Yeah. So then the following paragraph is talking about the shuttered mills. This is an example of metonymy, where he's taking the mills to represent the shuttered mills is using metonymy to represent unemployment. So this paragraph is going to be about unemployment and economic decline, which was happening in the country at that time.
Once again, to show the extent of the impact of this problem, we look at parallel structure. Every religion, every region, every walk of life. You see that parallel structure through 3 examples of tricolon, really skillfully done, right?
Again, many speakers like antithesis. The real problem is not someone who doesn't look like you will take your job. It's that the corporation you work for. Look for that antithesis. This is, again, powerful. It's not this, it's this. That's what antithesis means.
Yeah, it looks like we move on to the next paragraph, Mr. Giles, and as you said, like a political speech, we have to tackle a wide range of topics, and it looks like this time we're moving on to war and foreign policy and ideas about that. What can you pull out in terms of rhetorical features here?
He's, again, using that parallelism of serve together, fight together, bleed together, these powerful verbs, and he's thinking about, again, honoring the veterans and the soldiers words that are again, he's evoking that sense of patriotism. There's a lot of that repetition. Again, we see anaphora, we want to talk about. Again, this is the significance, and he's questioning the war itself.
Yeah, I think really deliberate choice using the word patriotism. We think about those rich values that run through a speech, and Americans do value patriotism, so it's really sensible for him to make that choice as well. How do we conclude, Mr. Giles?
When he's concluding, he's thinking about himself and like his sacrifice of running for president. He's also talking about hope of the future generation. And I think that's a powerful message about, like the young people are open to change, and he's appealing to the youth and celebrating, how they're going to be the future of the country.
Yeah, Mr. Giles, in the end, I feel like we have a really interesting, compelling speech about unity and the dangers of social division. Can you think of another speech we just read about that?
Yeah, Coach Boone.
Okay, now if we're thinking about Coach Boone's speech from the last video, and we're thinking about this idea of social division and perhaps how that leads to failure, how can we sort of tie these two? Let's go for a comparative thesis.
Okay, I like that. Just as a way to tie these two speeches
and then we'll bring this
together.
video to a close with a nice comparative thesis.
Okay, so we want to think about a comparative thesis. We want to acknowledge, perhaps acknowledge a difference, but then emphasize a similarity, or the other way around. We need to have comparative. We need to acknowledge that. So here's a stab at a thesis. While Coach Boone attempts to unify a team and Barack Obama a nation in different time periods, both leaders use powerful rhetoric to convey the message that division results in failure and possibly even destruction.
I like that, Mr. Giles. So I guess the similarity is that they're both working to use their language to overcome division that could lead to destruction, right? How are these speeches different then?
Well, they're different because of their context. First of all, that's an obvious difference. And again, the difference in the fact that we're talking to a team of football players versus in a broad nation of like different, like he's again addressing a wider nation.
Yeah.
That, to me, was a difference.
For sure, and you can think about the differences in formality. Coach Boone can use colloquial language as he's talking to teenagers, and he's in an authoritative position, where Barack Obama is speaking more as equals to a nation, trying to gain their trust to elect him for the candidacy.
Yeah, and I think again, there's other nuanced differences that you can talk about. I mean, there are obviously like the simplicity of talking to a team versus the complexity of talking to a nation.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Folks, I think in the end, what we want to demonstrate here today is that if you are aware of the conventions of speeches, just like any other text type, you can read critically, you can think deeply about what are the big ideas embedded, then we're looking for authorial choices and how language is used to shape meaning. Once that's done, you can do many things. You can make a thesis statement, you can make a comparative thesis statement, you can pull out a global issue. You're armed for anything you need to do in life with these skills. So stay with us, keep on acquiring these skills, and we will see you next time on the channel. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.